So in this episode, we're discussing the new sequel for Evil Dead. But before we begin, if you want to help keep this channel going, go ahead and click the join button down below this video and sponsor this channel today, because YouTube doesn't want to sponsor anything that's not kid-friendly anymore. So if you want to see this channel continue, sponsor. And with all that said, let's get started. So recently, Sam Raimi has announced that there's a new Evil Dead sequel in the works. And the producer is none other than Bruce Campbell. I know a lot of you are getting super stoked right now and you want to see sequels to the show and all this other stuff, but you have to remember, Bruce Campbell already announced and stated and reconfirmed he is no longer going to play Ash. He is too old, he no longer wants to do it, but he does want to produce the new sequel. So if you're looking for a continuation to the show, which a lot of you were hoping for, it's not going to happen. And I don't think it should, because I think the show ended perfectly. It left it completely open, but at the same time, nowhere really to go. And yes, I know you're going to argue, but he could battle in the future. And then what? They're going to freeze him again and continue the process over and over again? Think about that. I think it ended perfectly, because sometimes things just have to end open. They don't need complete closure. You don't have to go out with his death or the end of every single freaking demon to ever exist. It doesn't need to happen. And in this case, I think they ended it perfectly. It's left up to the imagination, because what are they going to do? Sit there, let him fight the battle, freeze him again, fight about it. That would just be stupid and repetitive. Let's get real. I think it ended perfectly. Even though it was canceled, it ended great. We don't need to continue that. Now, what they are talking about, and more than likely what's going to happen, because it's 2019, is a continuation to the remake. And if that's the case, we will no longer be discussing the sequel to Evil Dead, because I frankly want nothing to do with it. Now, don't get me wrong, the Evil Dead remake was good on its own. On its own, as an actual remake under the title of Evil Dead, it was terrible. It didn't bring anything that the original brought to the table. It didn't have the humor. It took itself way too seriously. There was none of the cool, campy, funny moments that we loved and enjoyed. The comedy was removed completely. They tried to make it too serious. And I really just didn't like it overall. It didn't feel like Evil Dead to me. You know, I think Cabin in the Woods felt like more of an Evil Dead remake than anything else, even though it was completely far off. But again, it felt more humorous. It felt more like the formula was there from Evil Dead, the original Evil Dead. And I just really didn't like the remake overall. I mean, it's kind of like Halloween 3. Halloween 3 was freaking amazing and still is to this day. It's brilliant on its own. But under the Halloween title, people don't like it because it doesn't have Michael Myers. Ooh. Okay, but it was still great nonetheless. Had they given it a different title, it would have been great across the board, even on release, because you remember on release, people were going into the movie expecting Michael Myers. They didn't get Michael Myers, so they were kind of like, what the hell is this? But at the same time, they enjoyed it, right? So this is the same way I kind of treat the Evil Dead remake. On its own, in its own entity, not called Evil Dead, pretty good. Didn't mind it. But under the Evil Dead name, terrible and missed the mark completely. So to continue a sequel on that would be stupid as hell. I don't want to see it. I know there's a lot of fans that don't want to see it. I'm sure there are some that want to see it. Personally, I don't. I don't care for it. I don't even really like it by itself. It was okay. All right, nothing great. And as far as my ideas for a sequel, I've already discussed them months ago. If you haven't seen that video, go and click that link right there. Basically, what it was the idea of Ash's offspring. Yeah, because we all know Ash has banged about 100,000 women. He probably has about 20 to 30 offspring out there. And yes, I know there was something that touched on this in the series, but this is completely different. This has nothing to do with the series. This is a completely different idea than what was taken from the show. Now, of course, Ash should be dead at this point because Bruce Campbell no longer wants to reprise his role as Ash. So they need to close his character. They need to give us some type of closure in that sense. I don't care if it's done in the sense of him being frozen and no longer there and nobody knows where he is. That could be the case. He's frozen because that's what happened in the series. Nobody has to know he's frozen or where he is. But this offspring is being hunted by the demons. They want to kill him, and he doesn't know who he is. He's an orphan, in a sense, or doesn't know who his dad is. And he goes and starts discovering and unlocking that Ash is his father, and he starts finding out stories and the tale of Ash. Obviously, you could tell the tale of Ash through the Necronomicon, as shown in the Army of Darkness. And he realizes this is his father, and it takes on the whole new meaning of the battle. The whole battle could commence in a massive, Marvel style, because let's get real, that's all Marvel does. There's no actual plot or anything great as far as the story is concerned when it comes to Marvel. It's just a huge CGI battle shitfest. Not terrible, but I like story. I have a lot of standards. We've discussed this many times. So, but we could end this. We could go through a whole story, create the plot, the narrative, all that great stuff, push it out there for an hour and a half, maybe lead it into another sequel, which is a massive battle. You could do it CG, I really don't care. I more prefer special effects, but in massive battle scenes, sometimes you just got to hit the CGI. I understand it. It's cheaper. And they could end up in this huge, massive battle, and you could bring back Pablo and all of them and just commence in this battle. And of course, that could still fit in and not screw up anything in the timeline of Ash versus Evil Dead, because this is going on while Ash is frozen and Pablo and everybody was not frozen along with Ash. So they could have been in this battle. You could bring them back. You could bring others back. Hell, there could be the moment when 10 or 15 other of his offspring, which would be funny, and it would, because we all know how many hookers this guy has banged, have now been found, and it's just this huge battle of his genetics, of his badassness, and his clumsiness at the same time to bring in the humor. And they could all be part of this massive battle for an hour and a half, and a sequel to the sequel, and just create this whole shit show of craziness. Right? Just a huge, massive battle, kind of like Endgame. I think that would be pretty badass. I don't know about you all, but it would tie in the whole comedy. It would tie in everything that could go on and an offset of where the timeline is as far as Ash vs. Evil Dead is at this point. It doesn't really matter because, again, Ash is frozen. You can't bring Ash back and still, in a sense, have Ash vs. Evil Dead fit into the timeline, because if you bring him back, then he's not frozen. So you have to consider that Ash versus Evil Dead is taken out of that timeline completely. That's just my views on it. Again, as much as I would like to see Bruce Campbell return, he's not going to, so just drop that narrative right now. He's going to be the producer. And as of this point, we don't really know where it's going, but I still like my idea. And if you want to hear more about that idea, because I've gone on for about 15 minutes stretching that story out on my idea, again, click that I, hit that video. It'll tell you everything. But let's know what your thoughts are down in the comment section below. Are you stoked for a sequel? Do you more want it to be something that I said, or do you want it to see it be, I don't know, a sequel to the remake? Not that I'm a fan of, but I'm sure some of you are a fan of. Also, don't forget, merch link down in the description below. Eat, Sleep, Meet the 4 Essentials for any horror fan. And if you're new here, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, hit the notification box if you don't know about kick-ass shit such as this. And even then, you will be notified of kick-ass shit such as this. So you got to go to the notification bell, make sure it says notifications set to all. And if you're using a smartphone, you then have to go into your YouTube settings, turn on those notifications, and then, and only then, will you be part of the 20% that's receiving the notifications that have done all that. Yeah. Good job, YouTube. You're killing it. Don't forget to join us in Discord, because that's where we are. We're going to kick-ass time in there. And as always, I'll see you next time.